Greetings everybody, my name is Tommy the Game Master and welcome to my channel. Well, Final Fantasy V will be my last published video when it comes to the Pixel Perfect remasters. I should say it was my third one done though. I decided to go through 6 after I recorded 5 and then talk about 3 and 4 before doing a video on 5. Also, since I had the pleasure of buying the original Steam version of 5, which I was playing when the Pixel Perfect remasters were announced and came out, I want to talk about this version as well. Which version is better, and was it really such a great idea for Square Enix to pull the old version off Steam so soon instead of giving people a choice between which versions to play? Yes, new purchasers, this might not help you because you only had the Pixel Perfect remaster to choose from, but those who did purchase the original of 5, is it worth the money to upgrade to Pixel Perfect? I want to talk about that. First, my overall history with Final Fantasy V here. I bought it used on the PlayStation 1 a little under 20 years ago, and my first thoughts after playing this version was, it was okay. Not perfect or great or anything. Oh, I guess I should mention before we do our little comparison between the old mobile version and Pixel Perfect Remaster, I don't care what anyone has to say about the old mobile version. The worst port we saw in the USA, hands down, is the PlayStation 1 version. Long load time, slow as hell gameplay, a translation that was annoying, especially with Ferris, who talks way too much like a stereotypical pirate to where you wish she would walk herself off the plank. She is that annoying. Don't get the PS1 version of the game. 20 years ago was the only way to experience Final Fantasy V. Right now, there are just tons of better ways of experiencing this game. Anyways, as I was saying, Final Fantasy V, unlike 4, which had a great story based on limited hardware, and 6, which took the potential of telling the story on the SNES to all new heights, pushing the Super Nintendo to its limits, 5 is kind of average in its presentation. Don't get me wrong, the story is there, and it makes an impact, but at the same time it's more interested in the overall quest than the narrative. But the gameplay itself is pretty damn solid. With that said, the nature of the battle system does make this one of the harder Final Fantasy games. With that open-ended battle system, the game, especially towards the end, will challenge you to make sure you're making full use of it. And if you're not leveling up jobs, devising new strategies, and grinding quite a bit, it's going to ram a boot up your hiney when you challenge the end levels. Alright, it's not that bad, and actually grinding and leveling up the jobs here is a lot more quicker and a lot more satisfying than what you got in Pokemon Stinky Poo. Let's talk about Final Fantasy V. As I've said before, Final Fantasy V's weakest point is its story. It's okay for 16-bit, but it hasn't aged well. Chrono Trigger, this is not. But with that said, it's not Final Fantasy 8 or 13, where the narratives screw the pooch and the characters are unlikable. The characters here are likable enough. The story is gripping enough. My main complaint about it is that it feels like if it just got a little bit more time and a few more things added, it would have been a great story. What we get here is just merely passable. Anyways, let's talk about it. So the story starts off with probably the guy who has the worst name of any JRPG protagonist, named Bartz. He's sitting down to dinner and having it interrupted by having a meteor fall nearby. Okay, who here pissed off the Gamelons? When they start throwing meteors at you, you're kinda screwed. At any rate, he goes to investigate, saves a princess named Lena who happens to be nearby and is out looking for her father, and also meets an old guy who's an amnesiac named Galuf. Oh yeah, someone who has amnesia or Swiss cheese memory or just repressed memories, I'm sure that won't be a trope in the next several games. Anyways, Then Lena says there is something wrong at the Wind Shrine that holds one of the 4 elements of nature, and she has to get there. A short time after Bart ditches the two and getting a chocobo scolding about it, he finds them in the middle of a pirate's den, and they both try to steal the pirate's boat before being stopped by the pirate Captain Ferris, who locks them up for trying to steal her ship. But not after hearing Lena's pleas and the amount of wit Bart has, which is absolutely none. He calls her a piratey pirate for crying out loud. Arrgh, he be a piratey pirate. He also be a piratey pirate. But that thar be a spoony bard. Surely everyone pokes fun of the spoony bard line from 4, despite it actually being a real word that fits Edward to a T, but no one talks about how lame piratey pirate is, and that this lame line exists in the better, more official dub rather than the PS1 rough draft. To me, it's hilarious. At any rate, Ferris decides to not only let them go, but help them when she noticed Lena has a pendant similar to hers, and Lena looking for her father. At the Wind Crystal Shrine, they notice it's been shattered, and the spirit of King Tycoon telling them to take the shards and the power. The crystal enhances each of their abilities, and they set off to stop the rest of the crystals of the elements from breaking. Because each one breaks and destroys, it stops that force of nature. The wind crystal just stopped the wind from blowing because it broke. And eventually the air will get polluted because of that. If the water crystal breaks, then you'll stop the current of the ocean. Fire breaks, fire will no longer heat. Earth breaks, your feet will weaken without the earth crystal because the ground won't be able to support you. And as bad as all these sounds, it's never really brought up. Oh sure, when the wind crystal breaks, it's a major plot point that they can't take ships around, but you never get too much of a complaint about the fire being weak or you see the world polluted as these crystals break, because of course they're all going to break. Granted, Super Nintendo game, but stuff like that always gets me thinking about what could have been or should have been to make the story greater and the threat of these crystals breaking more up front. Anyways, all the world's crystals have been connected to machines that have helped power them up and increase the bounties they possess. But because of this, they are all breaking as the machines are draining them of their energy and causing them to shatter. And they all, of course, shatter the moment our heroes get close to them. But before long, the group realizes there's an evil presence at work behind their shattering. Also, every time they get close to one, a meteor falls down and is followed by a warrior who gets out and tries to prevent it from shattering and ultimately failing. Eventually, Galuf starts to see a connection between himself and these incidents and regains it fully when the last meteor contains his granddaughter, Kryl, who managed to jog his memory back. It seems that the 4 elemental crystals' powers were also used to seal an evil mage called X Death away, and with all of them shattered, X Death returns and then threatens Galuf's world, causing Kryl and Galuf to jet away in one of the meteors. But with the help of this game's Sid, which is one of the better Sids by the way, he never joins your party, but he does help out improve the airships and gives out a lot of meaningful exposition. Anyways, with his help, the gang managed to turn the remaining meteorites into a teleportation device, as well as give us a call back to the original game. Bart's and the gang then jump in and teleport to Galuf's world. Now, when I did my Tales of Symphonia review several years ago, I did chide the game story of being derivative of Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy V for good reason. It is. But Symphonia did the story better. Granted, it was on the GameCube and PS2 and not the meek Super Nintendo, so they had a room to expand the story and visuals by quite a bit. But Galuf's world is a bit of disappointment. Other than the mountains looking a bit different, there isn't a change from Bart's world. There's no difference in cultures or change overall in design to really set the worlds apart. Your time here is brief compared to the other 2 worlds you encounter. It basically goes around you trying to get back to Galuf's kingdom, trying to break one of the shields around X-Death's castle, trying to stop him from destroying a magical forest, and then storming his castle. Oh, and in the middle of this, X-Death captures Creely, and Galuf dies, saving her. It's not Aerith's death from Final Fantasy VII, but they do a decent job. Galuf, before he dies, manages to do some damage to X-Death, claiming that it's love that is driving him and not hate. It's a really good scene, and after that, Krill gets all his stats and job buffs. But after storming the castle and defeating X-Death, it seems like this was all for naught, because X-Death manages to destroy all of Galuf's world crystals, having the two worlds combine into one again. Like I said, Symphonia totally stole this game's plot, but also did it better. With Symphonia, you had Lloyd's world of Silverant kind of be this very rural, very poor backwater place, while Tathiala, the world you go to, is much more prosperous, bigger cities, bigger town, much different culture, much more scientifically advanced. You don't get that here. You get a few things that say there's some advancements from Bart's world, but not much. Anyways, the gang wakes up near Tycoon Castle after the world fuses together, and thinking that the danger is over, Bart and Krill, and later Ferris, decide to explore the world, only to find out that X-Death is still alive, turning into a splinter to survive. Oh yeah, X-Death's true form is a giant tree. Yeah, there is a word that describes this, and that word is stupid. Really stupid. I know Japanese culture is closer to nature than us in the West, and they have tree monsters in their folklore that are death sentences if you run into them. But from a Western's perspective, this plot twist is just dumb. And if I would go into X-Death's personality, he's not a 3D villain. He's evil because he's the bad guy. Don't get me wrong, he can be threatening at times, but he's got no backstory other than he's a tree that got sealed up by Galuf several decades before the main story started. Also, his character design is the same as Golbez, only it looks like X-Death managed to attend Arts and Crafts Day. Other than that, he's just your typical evil that has to be banished in order for the game to end. Anyways, it seems that X-Death has brought the worlds together so he can obtain something called the Void and suck up the entire world into it. Now do you see my complaints about the crystals? The fact that, the wind stopping or the water no longer being pure and clean to drink would be enough of a threat, but they bring this void stuff in, making the crystal shattering kind of pointless. Anyways, Barton and the crew have to go and find 4 tablets that will let them collect 12 sealed weapons in order to fight X-Death. And oh yeah, eventually they get Lena back in the group too. Okay, so which one had the better story? Well, both the old mobile and the Pixel Perfect remaster for everything I saw had identical text. There was no major changes to the lines or to the plot, and they both did a better job than the PlayStation 1 version. That said, my award goes to the game that doesn't have butt-ugly font, has larger character designs that show more emotions, and even has character portraits seen in the original instruction books and ads, even if some of these designs are a bit goofy. What the hell is up with King Tycoon's face here? That looks ridiculous! Still, the point in this category goes towards the original mobile game and Steam releases. Play in Final Fantasy V is probably one of the strongest in the series. While it may be weaker on story and graphical power compared to the other 2 SNES entries that it's sandwiched in between, but when it comes to the gameplay, 5 is best in the series when it comes to Super Nintendo games. So how does it work? Well, as far as progression goes, 5 does what Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger would do later. Have first parts being somewhat linear. Don't get me wrong, there are some moments early on where you can break off and explore, but for the most part it's getting to point A to point B. And then the third act being a bit more open-ended, meaning you can go straight to the final boss if you want. That said, you're going to get your butt kicked if you run off and do it first thing, and you don't collect the tablets, the weapons, and other side bosses that will boost your magic. And while 5 doesn't do this as big or as grand as those other 2 examples, it did it first and it does it well. The dungeons here are for the most part pretty good. There's not too many dungeons that are overloaded with trap rooms and monsters, and most are easy enough to navigate on your own, but the Pixel Perfect Remaster does provide maps if you need them. What is the biggest part is the job system that it uses. Going back to the original, in 3, you get jobs you can select, each with their own abilities. There's like 20 jobs that you can unlock and earn as you progress through Bart's world, which is perfect because it gives you time to explore and find out what jobs you like and want to improve on. The first one from the Wind Crystal are your typical Final Fantasy jobs. Things like Monk, Knight, White, Black, and Blue Mages. But each crystal you get will give you more jobs to do and more options to pick from. But it doesn't stop there, it gets even better. When you use a job, that job gets ability points and levels up the job. This unlocks special rewards for physical fighters like Monk, gets things like Bare Hands that lets you provide powerful attacks for going unarmed. For magic users, each magic spell you obtain has a level. While you're in that job, your level is max, so you can use them all if you wish. But if you change classes and put in the magical abilities as its second, it's locked to whatever that job level it was. What that means is if you have a monk and use some white magic if you want, you can also have summoners that go barehanded. Well, some are better than others, each have their own features and areas where they're useful. So picking a combination of jobs and what to put them on gives you a lot of room for planning and strategizing. Great part is that later in the game when you need to raise these quickly and get powerful moves and abilities, they increase the AP a lot, making it easier to get these moves and abilities unlocked. If there is one complaint I have about this job system is that you can only basically put up one ability. Not a problem hooking up a magic to a fighter, as most mages skills only need to basically have one level. You know, your black magic comes at just one black magic level setting. But the other casts like Thieves or Geomancer, each ability they earn is separate and use that ability space, meaning you have to choose to go back and forth between 2 different abilities constantly. This can be a pain sometimes. Still, overall it's a great battle system that makes you think and experiment a lot about what abilities you want to use. And maxing out jobs will give bonus stats. The free Lancer ability making that extremely powerful later in the game. That said, this game does use the system to make it extremely hard towards the end. If you aren't paying attention and grinding job levels, X-Death will kill you easily in his final boss form, so be prepared. So which one has the better gameplay? Again, like story, no huge changes in the gameplay between versions. With that said, Pixel Perfect is the harder of the 2, but only because they balanced out some of the jobs like Geomancer to where they were in the original Super Famicom. In the old mobile version, you had some access to some pretty strong moves right from the start when it came to Geomancer. Made fighting Titan here easy because you could basically one-hit kill it using Gaia. No longer is that possible in Pixel Perfect Remaster. You have to fight him fair and square. So again, going by some slim margins, I'm going to go to the version that is faster, let me run easier. I mean, I can run in Pixel Perfect just by pressing down the button. In the other version, I'm still moving at half speed with the Thief's extra speed run ability on. And it even provides me a good map of the dungeon so I can tell where I'm going when I'm running around. And if you're wondering about the cut content, well, I wasn't able to finish the special dungeon. I got done with the game, got started on the extra content, and then decided to go through Pixel Perfect and then start the dungeon. Unfortunately, my computer's heat fan quit and my processor then got fried. So I had to rebuild a new computer, and although I'm still using some of the old hard drive, it looks like I lost the save data file in the process. I do have some opinions on the new jobs. I were able to try that, and to me they kind of sucked compared to the old ones. I don't really see the value in these new jobs that make the game any fun. Don't get me wrong, most of the time more is better, but I don't think we're missing much not having these jobs. And oh yeah, Pixel Perfect UI is so much better. I would be remiss not to point it out. So Pixel Perfect takes the point, leading us tight as we go into the graphics. Since the two versions differ the most graphically, let's just skip to the versus part. Pixel Perfect is trying to upgrade the looks of the original. Everything is based off the original Super Famicom. All the monsters are redrawn based off the 16-bit game. Character sprites look like the original sprites, just cleaned and polished for modern day displays. They did a hell of a job on effects. Going through E-Story Cave and seeing all the water still blows me away. And some of the other particle effects from spells and summons are just beautiful to look at. It'd all be blown away despite having some really small sprites and some old looking monster designs, but these designs are there by choice. It is a pixel perfect remaster of a 16-bit game after all. That said, I get screen tears and shimmers on my screen playing full screen on Pixel Perfect. It's done this on several TVs, quite a few different computers, so it's the way this game was made that was doing this, and I hope Square Enix patches it. The old mobile version here has a lot better monster designs. The upgrades look really good. It also has some updated effects. Not quite as good as Pixel Perfect Remaster, but that's to be expected given the age. Things like water look good, but nowhere near as impressive. Same thing as, say, like the effect from the beam that Bahamut fires out. Not as good as Pixel Perfect, even though the dragon itself looks better firing said beam. The character sprites are bigger, and you want to know something? This makes me think that the old mobile port here is better than the Pixel Perfect Remaster, even when it comes to the character designs. Uh-oh. Okay, can I explain for a moment what I mean? The character sprites aren't pretty. They could have done a better job in this one in their redrawing of the sprites. Granted, they're supposed to look like the original artworks here, but the colors themselves looking kind of bright and smudgy, like they were designed in some sort of old version of Microsoft Paint, doesn't help their look. But they are bigger and more emotive compared to the original sprites and the Pixel Perfect sprites. They have a better animation. Top it off with better font and text box that I said in the story, and just with the way these characters do better emotions, I got a better experience playing the old mobile version of 5 when it comes to graphics. Unlike Final Fantasy VI, which already had large expressive sprites that looked excellent for their age, Final Fantasy V did not have that advantage to begin with. So these are a step up when it comes to the old mobile versions. I think why a lot of people pile onto 5's original mobile version is just how good Final Fantasy IV 3D version went with cutscenes and extra story content. If they actually did that with 5 on the 3DS, I think it would have given 5 the final push to make the story really great. It's a shame that it never happened, but I'm not going to pile that onto the old mobile version. Point on graphics goes towards the old mobile version. The sound in this game is really good, from the 3 world themes, each being mysterious and just egging you on to explore the world and hurry up so you can stop X-Death, to some really fun village themes. They all sound good and the soundtrack is really solid. Not the best one Final Fantasy ever had, but still pretty good. As far as the verses go, do we really even need to do this? Yes, they screwed up a small part of the Black Chocobo song, but the rest of the Pixel Perfect Remaster soundtrack is, well, perfect, and it's worth the price of admission alone. So this point, of course, goes towards the Pixel Perfect Remaster. So there we have it. It's really a tie. Pixel Perfect Remaster has faster gameplay and way better sound, while the original mobile port has better text in the character profiles, making enjoying the story a little bit easier. And the larger, more animated character sprites makes it a better looking game in my opinion. It's why I wish Square Enix hadn't George Lucas the Final Fantasy series and kept the original mobile games up on Steam. I can understand them wanting to pull it off mobile, especially iOS, but the thing about PC users is they usually like to patch and mod their own games. Keeping the original up and letting Steam users patch the game as new operating systems came out would have been a better option to Square Enix. Then people could choose which version they want rather than one of them having to become vaporware. You'd let us make the choice in Final Fantasy VIII, giving us both the old PC as well as the new HD versions. You could have done it with the Pixel Perfect and the original mobile versions on Steam. Instead, you decided one needed to become vaporware. Oh well, complaints aside, Pixel Perfect version of 5 is still worth the $12 asking price and is definitely worth a pickup. Oh, and before I do go, I should mention Final Fantasy does have two historical things going for it. The introduction of Moogles, along with this meme where enemy boss who has a super powerful form becomes small and weak upon joining you when it comes to Carbuncle here. I do believe he started the meme. He's literally, "I will tear the flesh from your bones and feast upon your entrails," to, "I want hugs and cuddles." Anyways, leave your thoughts down below what you thought of Final Fantasy V. You guys have a wonderful day.